when the mural program came through and was like, we'd like to do a pilot, remember? People-
All right, and good afternoon and welcome to the City Council, excuse me. Welcome to the City Council Finance Committee meeting of February 15th, 2024. We have 4 items on the agenda. The first of these is discussion regarding the forfeiture and seizure policies.
Yes.
Who's taking the floor? Anthony's taking the floor. Mr. Francisco.
Okay, so, in your packet, you were forwarded a draft of a seizure policy for discussion. My understanding is that we would not adopt it at this meeting here, but just for your discussion to give us any suggested changes that you might want to make before we would send it to the council if you chose to in the form of a resolution. And I'll ask the city attorney if she wants to speak through it in with no warning, I will
Trying
ask the
to
city
give
attorney.
Anthony
if
the opportunity because I think he drafted it, but, so this just very generally describes, I'll stand up, sorry, I get lost behind these little chairs, or big chairs. This just very generally describes sort of the state of the law on what we can do with these seizure funds. We have, for state charges, we have an agreement with the DA's office about what we can do with these funds. There are limitations under federal law as well on what we can do with these funds. And so this just very generally refers to those and sets a policy for how these would be spent based on those.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I was curious about number 5, purpose of seizure funds. I was curious about providing victim restitution and compensation. What does that look like?
That is given a permissible use, but funds could be used under the authority of the police
So
department
if you
to.
had a domestic violence situation and somebody needed to stay in a hotel, you could use that for that?
Theoretically, yes.
Okay.
Is that different than, oh, I'm sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
So how, have we ever done anything like that?
Not to my knowledge, I didn't know if Mr. Barber might know.
I'm sorry,
Do
what's
you
the
know if we'd
question?
ever used seizure funds?
Like a domestic abuse scenario? No, we have a couple of resources in town, including a shelter that provides that resource. So they're provided for.
So everybody who has to leave their home because of domestic violence stays at this shelter? Doesn't seem congruent
There's a
with,
specific
I'm
women's
still
shelter.
talking. It doesn't seem congruent with what April Dosher told us about the majority of people leaving.
I don't think he's talking about the friend's house. I think he's talking about.
No,
perhaps-
I'm talking about that because there are people who don't stay at the shelter you're talking about and end up homeless and using the shelter that is a friend's house. That's what I'm talking about. And then also knowing that people are staying at OU Motel. Yeah, there's the whole thought process too. So you could use the victim restitution and compensation to house a DV, domestic violence, woman and possibly her children.
Theoretically, yes, under this policy.
And we've never
theoretically.
done that before.
Not to my knowledge.
I think some of it's going to depend on the source of the funds too. Federal law is different and has less flexibility on what we can spend those funds on. And then with the state charges, as I said, we have an agreement with the district attorney's office that restricts what those funds can be spent on. Those agreements can change, so the policy's written more broadly for what could be allowed, but what we have in place right now includes this agreement with the DA's office, and then whatever we get from the Department of Justice, we have to follow those strings that are in law currently.
So then 6 comes to permissible uses of seizure funds, and it says victim restitution, providing financial assistance to victims of crime for recovery, rehabilitation, and other related expenses. So that could be like getting somebody housed.
Potentially. I mean, I don't know where that came from, Anthony.
We had several similar policies that we drafted this from, but again, these are just things that could be done. I
Okay.
don't know that they have ever been done.
Well, I'd like to explore that, especially in the data I got with oversight, there were a significant number of women who are staying at that shelter that experienced sexual assault
And
or
when you say shelter there, you mean
the friend's house. who in the last year alone were victims and ended up needing a temporary emergency shelter. That is not really restitution for them. And that is something I've heard from my community about using these type of funds to help actual victims. So that seems like something worth exploring.
Just to speak up, this is very broad, so these uses are allowable either under the federal guidelines or the state guidelines, and that's what some agencies use those funds for. So I wanted to give the council all the possible options and then allow you to kind of limit them as you see fit. So, but that's why all those additional uses that we may have never used those funds for before came from.
And I
Okay.
know that in the examples that you just gave, there are other agencies in town that provide those services. But these are potentially uses for seizure funds.
Okay, well, reducing the number of women staying at a friend's house would be great if we could explore that. So that's where my mind goes. Thank you for this information and the background.
There's also, is it VOCA is the Victims Restitution Act funds that we can use, and Women's Resource Center and the Catholic Charities that are active in that particular vein. that do
I
wonderful
didn't know if
job.
they would want their name mentioned.
Oh, I'm
but-
sorry. Okay. Yes, sir.
So along those same lines, I mean, I remember last week, April mentioned about they spent $500 a week on hotel rooms. I don't know, I can't recall if that was just for one person either, or one family, but it's a lot of money. You're talking a nonprofit spending $500 a week on hotels. Maybe this could be a way to help out with something like that, housing or shelter for domestic violence victims would be one thing. The question I had primarily, though, is if you could explain the difference between civil forfeiture and criminal forfeiture, where funds come from. Some are acquired through a criminal adjudication, and the part that I have the most heartburn about is the civil part, where you don't have to commit a crime, you don't have to even be accused of a crime, and you don't have to be convicted of a crime, but the government could seize your property if they determine that they think it was used for a crime. And then in a civil case, you have to prove, the government doesn't have to prove anything. You have to prove that your property wasn't used for something drug-related or whatnot. And so, like I mentioned about my experience of being adjudicated from criminal charges and the district attorney's office continuing to try to keep the property that we had. After we were found not guilty of criminal charges, they used civil asset forfeiture to try and keep our property. And in that court hearing, they argued, Your Honor, we don't need to prove anything. This is a civil case. Mr. Robert Cox, he needs to prove that these pipes are not for marijuana if he wants them back. And thankfully, Judge Stice didn't agree with that and ruled in our favor, but I was just like, wow, you're found not guilty of criminal charges and the government still tries to keep your property and argues that you have to prove that you didn't do anything wrong when it should be their onus. So that's kind of where I've had a problem with it. And as I've learned more about it over the years, you know, the difference between a criminal, like police find a semi-truck full of drugs, something is adjudicated criminally and proceeds are obtained through that way or property. So my kind of direction was discussing the difference between criminal and civil, and if there was a way where we could, maybe we accept criminal asset forfeiture funds, but maybe we either don't accept civil ones or we have a higher standard for it. I'm not sure, but that's kind of the road I've been trying to get down on that.
So Catherine or Anthony, do you know if the agency, is there a way that they can identify the civil versus criminal seizure funds? Is there accounting set up that way?
No, it's only state versus federal,
Okay.
but we could tie back to the case that was adjudicated. It just happens to be one or the other.
I mean, how much work would that be for you guys to
It's
figure
more so
out?
work for them, but.
Well, let's talk a little bit about my understanding with regard to the process. I'm not totally familiar with what you're talking about when you say criminal forfeiture. Because usually a forfeiture case is, if you have a criminal case, someone's stopped or someone's arrested, their charges filed, their assets that are seized that are alleged to be the proceeds from some criminal activity, that person can get convicted, but the district attorney's office still has to file a civil asset forfeiture case in order to get title to whatever assets were seized as a result of the alleged criminal activity. So you're gonna have a civil case that you can tie those funds back to, that you can go and look at with the understanding. In that scenario, there's gonna be both an adjudication of a crime, there's also gonna be an adjudication in a civil case that what's being forfeit were more likely than not the assets of some criminal enterprise. I think the difficulty that we have when we're talking about this issue has to do with a lot of forfeitures are somebody's coming up I-35, they get stopped for some reason, they got $100,000 of currency in the trunk of their vehicle. The officer will ask the occupant of the vehicle, whose money is this? Who's this belong to? And they go, I have no idea. I don't know who it belongs to. Okay, so if you're saying it's not yours, it gets seized, those people are let go because there's no other evidence of any other criminal activity, but then the question becomes, who does this money go to? The DA's office still has to file a civil asset forfeiture case to give anybody who wants to come in and claim that this money belongs to them the opportunity to come in and convince the court that it's more likely than not that this is their money and it's not the result of some criminal enterprise. And when that doesn't happen, those assets get forfeited and go to the state to be divided between the law enforcement agencies. So a lot of the difficulty comes in those instances, and those are the cases that when I hear people say, well, there was no criminal conviction. And yes, that's true, but the factual scenario is a little bit different because you've got somebody saying, this money, I have no idea whose it is. It's not mine. Under those circumstances, that you still have to go through that civil process with regard to getting title to those assets or those funds.
Okay, yeah, I mean, from an accounting perspective, if there was a way to identify, the different funds, federal, federal
Yeah,
criminal.
we only track state
Yeah,
versus
I mean,
federal.
if that's too cumbersome, then,
Well, I'm not gonna say that we couldn't, I'm just saying we haven't.
okay.
Where we have had assignments in the past to find out, what case this was tied to, we always go back to the police or to the legal department to find that out. We just have money. We just, here's what's in that fund.
Okay.
One private.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So my question about that scenario though is it against the law to have $100,000 in cash on you?
It's not against the law
And
to have
is-
$100,000 in cash, but the issue that goes along with that is there still has to be probable cause for the officer to believe that there's some criminal activity to look in the trunk to begin with. So you still have to satisfy that burden. There was probable cause for this officer to look into your trunk. He looks into your trunk, he sees something and says, who does this belong to? And you say, I don't know. But it's not against the law.
Right.
But the question becomes, that person still has the right, the opportunity to come to court to say,
But that's a burden that is placed on the public. I'm not from Oklahoma. Now I gotta travel back to Oklahoma and I gotta go appear in a court. I might have to hire an attorney. That attorney might cost more than the amount of money that was seized from me. So you see where I'm getting at. It's not, and I mean, an officer can come up with any reason to find probable cause if they really want to, right?
well,
Like people get searched on the side of the road, and the most prominent case was that one with the church group coming through Oklahoma who got stopped and had thousands of dollars taken from them, and it took them years to get it adjudicated, and they got it back. But
there
you
is
know.
absolutely no doubt that you can point to some abuses of that process. Usually in small municipalities or smaller shift.
rural areas, yeah.
You can point to those cases.
Like, I don't think Norman PD needs to pull people over to take property from people.
Well, as
But
a general rule, the
a small
police
town or a
department
rural area.
probably does that. It's more interdiction on the interstate. But when we've talked about this issue before, what no one seems to clue into is the concept of the reason this is so difficult or can be difficult is because the law puts the burden, or law puts the decision with regard to when you can file a replevin action at the district attorney level. In other words, if I get stopped and my assets get seized, I don't have a right to go to district court to file a replevin action today so that we can get this issue resolved. The way the law has been written is the district attorney has the sole authority to make a decision as to when that asset, when that asset forfeiture case, civil case gets filed, which does mean I can wait you out.
Right.
Okay? So that's the difficult part of this process. The instances that I've seen, we had a case filed against, not a case, a claim filed against us for alleged profiling, and it was somebody driving from Ohio to Corona, California, in a turnaround trip. They drove there, it's a 30-hour trip, they drove 30 hours there, and the next day they turned around and drove back. From a trafficking perspective, that's a clear indication that that's probably what's going on. We stopped them, we separate this, the driver and the passenger were separated, they were asked questions about where they're going, their stories were totally different. Ultimately, a drug dog hit on the trunk of the vehicle, they opened it out, there's a bunch of marijuana and a bunch of ecstasy pills in the trunk. Those are the types of circumstances that tend to result in forfeiture. It's not, we made up some reason to stop you, it's a pretty sophisticated undertaking with regard to those circumstances. The difficulty that you're talking about really has to do with the procedural mechanism, and that is a legislative issue, not a police department issue.
Right, and that's where I'm coming from our angle is, as a city, do we accept funds that may come from questionable, like we don't know that it was a legitimate thing, or that's my concern, or someone is found not guilty of criminal charges and the government still tries to keep their property and succeeds. Maybe the judge isn't Judge Dice and agrees with
The issue for us would be, you can make a legislative decision that you're not going to accept those funds, but that doesn't mean those funds are going back to the person that they were taken from.
Right.
It's going to be kept by the district attorney's office.
Right.
So your officers are going out and doing some of the work and not being allowed to in the appropriate cases. I would argue that because these cases have to go through adjudication, it's not as if the rightful owner, if that person is out there, doesn't have a right to come in and say, this is my money, this is where it came from, give it back to me. We just had a case out of McLean County, well, that's exactly what happened. The DA's office ended up having to return all of the money because the people that it was taken from were able to come in and say, I just got an inheritance, this is where those funds came from. Now, obviously you have those cases like you talked about, we talked about the one where it was the church, they were at a church camp, they had a bunch of money, he was bringing it back to Oklahoma, got stopped in some small municipality, the money was taken, it clearly was theirs, it took them, like, it was very difficult for them to get that back.
Yeah.
I understand that those are out there. I don't know that those are the rule, those tend to be, or seems like to be the exceptions. A lot of the ones that I've looked at from our perspective generally are, someone was stopped for some legitimate reason, there was funds there, they were asked, who this belonged to, I have no idea, I can't tell you who it belongs to, I don't know.
Yeah.
So really, it was more of a, we're taking the money for safekeeping, if you don't know who it is, the police department seizes it with the intention of getting it back to the rightful owner, but nobody ever comes forward and says, yeah, that was mine.
I think that's part of it is, again, the burden being on that person has to
Actually, the
then go to
burden-
court and hire an attorney and do all that stuff.
The legal burden is on the district attorney's office to show that in that forfeiture action, especially if it results from some alleged criminal activity, they have the initial burden to show that these are the proceeds from some criminal activity. It's not as if the plaintiff or the defendant, because the difficulty is, and we talk a lot about in the law, it's really hard to prove a negative.
Yeah.
I can't prove this is not something. So the initial burden is not on the defendant, it's actually on the district attorney's office to prove that these funds are proceeds from illegal activity.
Well, just like I said though, in my personal experience, the ADA said straight to the judge, it's not, we don't have to prove anything. Mr. Cox has to prove that this property was not used in the commission of a crime.
But remember, the ADA.
And so Judge Stice agreed with us, but, you know, maybe another judge doesn't.
The ADA is not the person, the ADA, like me, any attorney, I can make whatever argument I want to make.
Right.
It's the judge that ultimately makes a determination as to what the law is, and obviously in that case, Judge Stice disagreed with the ADA's statement with regard to burden of proof. I cannot imagine that there's another judge over there that would rule differently.
Right, sure.
Again, if I bring the action, I have a burden to prove something.
Appreciate that, Rick. But yeah, just that it's kind of ambiguous. Each state has different rules. Some states are more strict about how they accept it, or if they do at all, or the burden of proof of something. And it's, like I said, I don't think Norman police have an incentive to do that, but in other places there is, and it gives that, oh, you're a rural small town, you're a sheriff's department, you take this property, you're going to benefit from it. Your department's going to get the value of that, and you're going to get to buy a new, you know, a Camaro police car to patrol the highway with, or something like that, you know. And so it gives the appearance that there's an incentive for law enforcement to pull people over on the highway and take their stuff, and then assuming that, well, if it's under this amount, they're not likely going to fight it because they're going to spend more to hire an attorney, and maybe they don't want to travel all the way back to Oklahoma multiple times to do it. So that's always been my concern, though, is that it's not so much a Norman PD is doing this, it's a holistic issue. And just the thought, though, of us using funds to buy stuff that may have come from somebody who didn't commit a crime but didn't or couldn't push back on it.
And if I may, I want to make sure that we understood the assignment to be to write a policy or to draft a policy for the usage of funds that had come into the city's possession.
That's correct, yes,
Seizure funds. What I understand Councilmember Holman to be kind of honing in on is what would cause us to come into possession of those funds. And that's beyond the scope of what we were.
What's our criteria as a city for accepting it?
That's the perfect
Yeah.
question.
And do you want us to take that extra step? I mean, and I don't-
Yeah.
I'd be interested in seeing what some of these, so like New Mexico, I think has a B plus or an A minus rating when it comes to their forfeiture law, but Oklahoma has an F, and the United States has a D minus or something as a whole. So most states are in the F and D category.
That's Southern Poverty Law Center.
Yeah. But just looking at different states' policies, Nebraska has a high rating. They're a bit more strict on what they, or how they do it. I'd have to read more. But that's kind of my line of thinking, though, was are other places, do they have a stricter criteria for accepting the funds, depending on where they come from or how they're adjudicated? And an attorney had mentioned to me there's civil forfeiture and then there's criminal forfeiture. Criminal being a criminal act was adjudicated, we knew it happened, and that's where it came from. Civil being the government thinks somebody did something, but they don't get charged with any criminal charges. And so that's kind of where that came from.
Matt, my argument, I guess, would be that we're not legislators, and we're definitely not in other states. There are ideas to be taken. But as Mr. Francisco says, what do we want to do? What do we want to have him do, and so that we're doing things correctly? I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
and in that I don't share the same visceral feelings that you do. I've never had it done to me.
Yeah, I didn't before that, so I didn't know anything about it.
What do we want to do with this? Do we want to use this paper as, for a study session or a time that we want to get together and discuss
I think it's a
good,
good
bad,
framework.
ugly,
right?
good framework? And do, what do we want to do?
Well, like I said, I'm just exploring options, but thinking, yeah, we're not legislators, can't change the state law, but in the city of Norman, if we said,
Yeah.
if it was set up like this, that we're like, okay, we will accept these funds, but we have a higher standard in Norman than the state has, or like, it's a criminal adjudication, and it's not just a civil case where, I appreciate Rick going into detail about that, but that's kind of where I was thinking though, is that we have maybe a higher standard, and then we have some guidelines like this about what we would use it for, so, we've spent a lot of it on the police department, but maybe it's worth maybe helping with domestic violence victims who need different stuff like that, because it talks about public safety, and I think we can fit quite a few things into public. I could argue that IT improvements, we could use forfeiture funds for that, right? Because it's a public safety matter.
We'd have to get it passed.
So, but that's kind of,
I was just gonna say, one thing we might wanna do also is sort of separate some of these things that money can be spent on between federally obtained funds and state obtained funds, because those rules are different for each one. And so there may be some things we can do with some funds that we can't do with others. And so that may be some additional detail we can add in here to make it a little more clear.
ideally too, the budgets and everything are, the way we would like. The police department doesn't need this type of funding because our regular yearly budget allocation is enough to meet all their needs. Now, that's every department, but ideally, you wouldn't need law enforcement agencies to rely on this. And like I said, I don't think Norman PD has to rely on this. We have a budget and a sales tax base, but in other areas where they don't have anything, this could be a significant part of their budget is
Yes, sir.
relying on this, so.
So I understand, your concern about being an incentive, I really do. And it seems like, once we get this policy drafted, it'll be kind of a guide for us. And, in my opinion, the best use of these funds would be to do something for the common good, like helping a woman who's escaping a domestic violence situation, or, a critical piece of equipment that either fire or police needs. So, I think this document is a good start. And like, Ms. Walker indicated, segregating, the federal and the state, I think would be good since the regulations for fed and state are different.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Councilmember?
Yeah, same, just gonna add that a clarification would be great. I'd like to prioritize, seeing it used on victims, as opposed to equipment, just because it should be something that we budget for if it's necessary. It shouldn't be something that we're hoping one-time funds that come in are gonna cover. Like, that just seems, we have a public safety study coming, and I feel that should be guiding our choices for future budgets.
Anything else on this for? Yes, sir.
So on the prohibited uses of seizure funds, one of those is activities contrary to the mission and values of the city of Norman. Is that printed somewhere what the mission and the values of the city of Norman are?
Yes.
Broadly speaking, it's for the health and welfare of the
Health, safety,
citizenry.
well-being.
But again, who gets to adjudicate that is
Right.
delegated to the police department by this
Oh.
policy.
So like if the mission and the values of the city of Norman aren't formally expressed somewhere, then they could at least be used to broadly contain or confine some of the uses of the seizure funds.
Yeah, we can certainly quote from the city charter about, the health and welfare and safety of the citizenry.
Last paragraph.
Okay, that's my only question.
But that's really broad. I mean,
Right.
don't sugarcoat that.
Yes, sir, Mr.
So, I was thinking about that, and I just kind of lost it for a second, but maybe I'll come back to it.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So we had talked about before when we were discussing last summer about using the funds for the purchase of the police cars and stuff, that we really did have a broad range of what we could use it for. Now, the district attorney might not agree with it, and maybe he doesn't want to give the funds to us if we don't follow his rules. But legally, we could use it for a pretty wide range of things if we wanted to.
State funds are generally more broad. We do have an agreement with the DA's office because they retain all that money until they decide to share it with us. And so they've got this agreement that provides for that. It said funds to be used solely for enforcement of controlled dangerous substances law, drug abuse prevention, and drug abuse education. That's what the agreement currently says.
Okay, so federal ones we could use for more broad, is that what you're saying?
No, federal's generally more restrictive.
We're restricted in that?
Yeah, this is an agreement that was entered into at the beginning of this fiscal year. And it was narrowed from previous years at that time.
So would purchasing 18 police cars fit in with that?
I think it
I mean, you
would
could pull somebody over
for
and force
enforcement
drugs, I guess, but-
purposes. Yeah, but we did that, we authorized that prior to this agreement. This agreement
Okay,
came into effect July 1st, so,
really?
yeah.
Okay. Well, I'd be possibly interested in renegotiating that agreement to do more than just drug enforcement, but to address a broader range of public safety matters, for sure. And I guess if the district attorney doesn't like it, then he could not give it to us, but yeah, I think we have a lot of public safety needs in Norman that, and everything needs funding, so I think it would make people feel better if it wasn't all going to the agency that may be collecting it.
Oh,
Using
going
it for
to
some,
police? To the police?
yes.
Okay.
So, not that none of it could or would, but fire department, IT department, domestic violence victims, other public safety matters. I think that could get, everybody still may not be real comfortable with it, but if they know it's going to multiple things that may be helping in the community, that could be a good thing. But I do like the framework here, something to work with.
I agree. Wait, one, please. One of the things that could happen in that is if we can have a copy of that MOU or agreement with the DA, then that would be something we added to this, that we would add in.
Yeah, and it may be that we want the policy to be more broad because it's got all the caveats in there that says, subject to these things, because these will change, you know? So it does give you some flexibility. I think that's enough to go around.
Oh, you have,
I do. Sorry.
wonderful. See in one line it picked up. Well, that'll help that'll help in making some determinations, and depending on what the DA wants to do, it's his agreement too. Perhaps that would further guide how we flesh out the policy itself.
Sure.
So, all right.
Okay.
Item number 2.
Mayor? I don't know if you wanted to take her question.
Normally we don't take questions and have participation. We form this out before we do this. Okay. Council. Question number 2, discussion regarding the FYE 2024-25 city budget for several things under Social and Voluntary Services Commission.
At this point in the budget process, we have normally come to the Finance Committee for discussion about these outside agencies who have requested additional assistance from the city's general fund. And I want to make sure that you understand that this is the general fund. A lot of the agencies get United Way money or they get CDBG money, that sort of thing. This discussion is about additional funds from the general fund. What we have concentrated on here is those agencies that have requested additional funds from the general fund to what they had in this current fiscal year. And you'll see kind of a 3-year history of what appropriations have been made from the general fund to these agencies. A lot of them have had a longer history than that of getting assistance from the general fund. And again, it's just totally open for your discussion, but again, we might recognize those agencies that have requested additional appropriations, or if you wanted to hear from all of them about their programs in general, we could do that, just totally up to you. It's unusual for us to have this many of them who have requested additional funds, so it's just kind of like, you'd be pretty much touching on all of them anyway.
Get the whole thing. I don't know who was first.
I think we were simultaneously,
Okay.
but, so historically or previously, so regarding these requests, is there a specific dollar amount that council has previously said, okay, we're going to allot X dollars and this is how we're going to?
No, way back when this first started, it was that the city's general fund had been paying for employees of some of the agencies that the city owned the building, the Sooner Theater, the Firehouse Arts Center. And so we didn't want those employees to, those agency employees to become city employees. So what was done at that point was that just the amount of money that they had been paying the individual was made general fund allocation to those agencies, under the understanding at that point that they would kind of wean down that general fund assistance over a 3 or 5 year period, and it kind of grew from there. So again, that's just the history. The amount of money now, particularly as it relates to social and voluntary services, expanded exponentially. And that was a council decision, basically, that you wanted to support those agencies to a greater extent. Again, just the Veterans Day Parade, the Mardi Gras, the Norma Music Festival, some of those were kind of new requests based on some circumstances that came up. Council wanted to support those agencies, whether it be on a temporary or a permanent basis. You'll recall it relates to the Norma Music Festival. There was also additional CARES Act money and ARPA money given just to support the Norma Music Festival through the pandemic. So again, there's a sort of a different history for each of these organizations. The Firehouse Arts Center is the one that got an exponential increase last year, and council wanted to make that a permanent level. So again, that's different history for each of them.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember.
So the increases, those are for the ones for this year, from what they had been
In
getting.
the furthest right column, yes.
Are those entities here that are asking for an increase this year,
I
can we
believe they
ask
are.
them what they
The only one that
plan?
I'm not sure about is the Veterans Day Parade, but they're only asking for a $50 increase.
Yeah, that's so, why not? Come on. So, a third, Center for Children and Families, are they here? Oh, well, there's a staff report too.
Yeah.
Performing Arts Studio Depot is custodial services.
Sure, so, in a nutshell, I think.
If you would stand or at least get closer to the mic.
I'll come
yeah,
over here, do you mind if I
mine's
sit down
Please
next to
do.
you?
That'll
I'll
probably-
have a seat
that'll
so
make
that
it
I
clear.
make sure we get the words and all the things. Thank you so much for letting us have a chance to be here. Thank you, Cody, for bringing me my papers so I don't forget anything. The depot is a little bit of an interesting situation because it is, as on the front page of your budget document, you talk about the depot being the place where the city was platted. And we help fulfill the obligation of providing a train waiting room 365 days a year. That's a significant effort on our part. So a lot of what we're asking for cleaning, for staffing, for assistance is really our part of fulfilling that requirement on behalf of our city to be hosting train services. Because we have, unlike many of the other organizations that you're taking a look at on your budget, we have not received that funding as the depot, but we do. We've received $5,000 maybe, and I think that increased to maybe $7,000, which is a big difference than what many of the other organizations receive. And we are operating 365 days a year as a train station on behalf of our community. In addition, it was the charge for the depot in its agreement with the city that we are open and available for community events for our community to use. We host all of the downtown parades. We have free space available for sister nonprofits, events, arts organizations, other festivals that take place, which we throw our doors open and take. But that again is staff time, cleaning time, supplies. There's all of those pieces that go into help providing that service. And I think what we're asking is that the city help us fulfill those agreements on behalf of the city.
The gentleman that sits out there and does stuff in a lot
Ken,
of,
he's amazing.
did he finally get paid?
Ken won't take it. We have tried. And part of the reason that we're asking now is that Ken has been, for those that don't know, we have an extraordinary volunteer named Ken. He is a train aficionado. For him, helping us with trains in the morning is like a kid with a full-size train set. He absolutely loves being there. He's there almost every single solitary morning, as Anthony well knows, and he helps host the train. He loves trains so much that he's had a satellite installed at his house and has special permission to have access to where the trains are, and has his own dedicated input into the train system. He's an absolute expert. Ken has been doing this for a while and as a volunteer, and he's not going to be able to do this forever. This is a part of the reason why we're trying to get resources in place so that we're ready to make that transition when Ken's ready to say, I've done this for 10 years now, I'm ready to back away. And we feel like this is going to need a paid individual. We need to pay for services. We have, like I said, paper products, cleaning the floor just to get ready for our day, all of the things that go into hosting nearly, at this point, 10,000 train customers every year that come through just in the morning. We have a full house every morning, and it takes resources. And so far, for the last 20 years, the depot has borne most of the cost for those.
Yeah.
So what kind of increase in traffic have you seen? You've been at the depot for a while.
For a decade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what has been the trend that you've seen basically over the past 10 years? Or as, visitors, number of trains coming in?
So a real increase. So we had some regular numbers of around 20-ish, and I'm happy to submit because Ken does keep very detailed reports, and I have daily reports for the last 10 years on all train customers that come through the building because Ken keeps them on our behalf. But we saw, as you can imagine, during the pandemic, nobody was riding the train. The trains were shut down. We didn't have passengers. The room was quiet. When they did restart, they waited on the platform instead of being in the building. And we wondered what that was going to be like post-pandemic, and the numbers are higher now than they were the 2 years prior to the pandemic. We are seeing increased ridership. Plus, as many of you may be aware, there's conversation about, we try to stay in the rail transit conversation at the depot because our planning depends on what changes are going to happen around us to that space. There's discussion of extending the train from Oklahoma City to Newton, Kansas. So that would add that. There's also additional discussion about the Heartland Flyer being a two-way, so that one would leave in the morning at both places and arrive at noon. Now, this is going to take several years to put in place, but again, we are feeling the need to be able to ramp up to ensure that we've got the resources to continue that service. And also the discussions around the Rail Transit Authority. Initially, there were 5 cities. Now there are only 3 cities, I believe, that are currently participating in that discussion. That may have slowed the progress, but we are not giving up on the idea that there might be a rail transit. And we do keep in the back of our mind as we plan programming what it would be like for the depot to be Grand Central Station for Norman, Oklahoma. And that's a different space to occupy, but it doesn't mean we couldn't be an art space and still really serve constituent groups. But for many of these things, these are outside the purview of our programming, and that's why we're asking the city for its assistance to help cover the part that makes us a functioning train station and make sure that that's not an undue burden on our ability to produce Summer Breeze and comedy and amazing concerts and an art gallery and all of the wonderful things we do.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I was gonna say, I went to a transportation Also, you did too,
That's
Mr.
right.
Mayor.
We had the Department of Transportation
Yeah,
in-house,
so
that's
that
right.
was the feds. And also, I was in there for the Mardi Gras parade where they were doing the awards for a minute, and then I popped out. But I'm supportive because obviously I know what you guys have put into it, and also the types of high-level visitors that come through. So,
We have an estimated, in addition to the 10,000 train customers that are there, we have approximately 25,000 people that come through just in guests for events that are hosted at the depot. And then we have another 10 to 15,000 that are through every year for the events that we put on in the depot, which we relegate to some spaces that don't interrupt our ability to serve the community at large. Thursday nights, Sunday nights, those seem to be our sweet spots. Yeah.
I'll be darned. Well, it has been a train station. Yes, sir.
If I may speak as a customer.
Yeah.
I'm a fairly frequent rider of the train, and I will say, a frustration that I have is the night service lacks.
Absolutely.
And I know that there were funds added a few years ago for the night service that didn't happen. But, you know, see, Norman is the first stop on the southbound train going to Fort Worth, and it's always on time. But coming back, Norman is the last stop, and it's almost never on time. And so those of us who are waiting, and, you know, yeah, I've gotten sophisticated enough to have the app, and, you know, it's gonna be 20 minutes late, it's gonna be 40 minutes late, and I can sit over there at the bar or something. But it would be really nice to have the depot open at night, with those varying schedules, just speaking as a.
I agree with you. It's got to be more common. When I was a child, that was a common way to travel for most of us that couldn't afford airplane fee. You know, we went to Atlanta that way. So
I have it's not a story we have time for today, but remember to ask me at some point about the fact we just discovered that the Chicago Mafia was run out of the depot for about 25 years by a man that lived in Norman, Oklahoma, out east of town.
Named Al Capone.
Nope, he worked for Al Capone, and his name was Murray Humphreys. You can go Google that and find documentaries about him. And he lived in Norman, and he was arrested by the FBI at our train depot in 1965, and taken back to Chicago to face trial. He ran the mob out of Norman. Just discovered this recently.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know how I
Patsies and
didn't know.
Totos,
Yeah,
and J-Pots.
the tunnel.
only in the,
There's a tunnel, and we're gonna find it. Yeah.
well, that's wonderful. Yes, sir.
So we went from 5,600 a year, and then increased that up to 11,800 last year.
So, according to the contract I received from the city, we only received 7,800 this year. For some reason, the additional 4,000 didn't make it into the funding. I don't know how.
That must be an oversight, it's in the funding.
Is it there?
Maybe in.
Well, then I'll
say
bring the
we-
contract back
Pretty
and
sure we
you will get it
approved that.
recut. Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
good to know.
Yeah, good to know. Great, hooray.
So, 11,800 is up to, increasing that to 50,700. It's quite a
Big leap.
$38,900 leap there. So I think we all love the depot and support it, but you've done a good job of explaining what it's needed for, but.
So I think a part of what we've been hesitant to ask for is bearing the real cost of this. We've asked for direct, exact costs that were related to us, like the exact number of paper towels. But really, I think what we are taking a look at is during our gallery hours, increasingly, we are asked to serve as Amtrak services. We get walk-ins every single day that ask us how to catch the train. We have dozen phone calls a day. We have all of these pieces that we do in support of train service that takes staff time and hours. We print all of the flyers ourselves so that we have them because Amtrak has stopped providing them. So we would like some assistance with a dedicated staff person that can be there to do that because it's ending up taking so much of our time that the normal tasks of showing someone around who wants to have an event or answering phone calls or providing reporting are things that are becoming secondary because we're paying attention to potential train customers as well.
What's that number?
Huh?
What's that number?
Halt.
Just a whack.
Yes, I believe I put in here, like, you know, where did I put it? Did I bring it with me?
I wonder if it's in our.
So I'd put a $30,000 for partial salary support for staff of the depot charged with managing the facility and hourly staff to coordinate and report to the city regarding our events, facilities issues. The other real part here is we get so bogged down in doing the day-to-day. Currently, we're having air conditioner issues. We've got leaks, we've got things going on in the depot that really need repair. And sometimes we move so quickly, we don't have the time to slow down, invite the city over, talk. Because if I gave you our salary breakdown, I mean, we are part-time people. We have a couple of hourly staff that maybe work 10 hours a week because that's all we can afford to pay them. And a couple of part-time staff, including myself as the executive director, who make about 25 grand each, and that's it. So having this kind of support would allow us to invest more hours in making sure that we're better serving the community and take the burden off of this portion of our staff for the management of this facility as a train station and for the support of those hours.
Well, our job is to do things in as excellent a way that we can. If we were gonna
Absolutely.
do things as an excellent way as we can, how much more money is that? If we said, this number is, where am I? 38,900. What would be enough to be able to help you keep things open in the evening, like, not just necessarily for Anthony, but there may be other people that are going up to Oklahoma City too.
No, that if we were gonna add, because night service is a thing that we were very interested in helping provide. We don't like it. We worked with Amtrak and we actually had discussions with BNSF and they have come out and put new lights on our platform. It used to be a dark platform that people arrived to at night and we did not like that. So we worked with BNSF and they have installed on their platform new lighting, which is helpful. But we would love for there to be a person there to have the doors open in case somebody's ride didn't show up and they were stuck on the platform or they needed to wait for 20 minutes. So that's a couple of hours of staffing. I don't know. I'm gonna say $50 times 365 days a year. That's,
We got
if you
one
add
there.
that to that amount, and now we're talking about night service. A couple of hours of somebody's time in cleaning up after the crew. And that's a low estimate, but I'm trying to be frugal. We are
Well-
very frugal at the depot.
And as are most things that, even though we treasure,
Yeah.
we don't usually pay well. Try being a teacher. And
Yeah, no,
so-
I have worked in nonprofit arts my entire career.
Well, if that number, what I guess I'm asking for you.
Yeah.
Is if that number were 58,900.
Then we would absolutely take a look at what it was gonna take to get night service started as soon as we could.
What's the thoughts from council? Adding another 20,000 to that to be able to do that?
So the total, okay, I wasn't make sure I understood the revenue
Bad
sheet here.
math.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
So your net revenue is 8,868.57 after expenses and everything. There's actually.
That was last year, and we got lucky because there was additional ARPA funding that was the last round of that came in, so that made it the bottom year nice and soft last year. We were
Okay.
happy about
Yeah, I
that.
hadn't seen the breakdown like this in a while, because
Yeah.
we just talked last year about increasing it, and I was like, you can ask for an increase, and.
Right.
And so I wasn't fully aware of where the revenue all came from for the
Yeah.
depot, and so the City of Norman Amtrak, that 5,600, that's the part that we contribute, not Amtrak, or Amtrak directly is
No, Amtrak contributes nothing
nothing, okay,
to us.
that's great.
Amtrak contributes nothing. We are technically what's called an unmanned station. So in Amtrak size, they would be happy if people arrived at a dark platform or an empty building. There are several stations along the way where that is the case. But as this is a welcome to our downtown Norman, and we have this beautiful public-private partnership where we get to produce Summer Breeze and concerts and comedy night and an art gallery and all of the fun things that we get to do. This is a piece that was a part of the original agreement with the depot and the city that we would provide space. A part of the initial $30,000 cost was the anticipation that currently, because our funding is so tight, we only have open hours on gallery hours from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. With this increase, we could extend that from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. And now I have a staff member who's there every morning to help train customers, and that alleviates the pressure on Ken to be the guy who's there every single solitary
amazing.
morning.
And
He's
you'd
amazing.
And you'd be able to do the night if we increase
If we
the
add
thing?
another 18, then I would be working to find a nice contract person that was interested in being our evening waiting room host. I would absolutely look into that. We would be, that's one of the things, and we did, you're right, I think it was the 2019-2020 fiscal year where we didn't accept that additional bit of funding because we ended up with a pandemic instead of opening evening
Yeah.
reception things. We ended up not having trains at all.
Well, I definitely don't see activity at the depot decreasing. And if, the movement by Amtrak is more than I've heard in years about them doing. They've been talking about the Newton thing forever.
Yeah.
And that being a key connection. Because those that don't know, if you wanted to go to Chicago on the Amtrak, you have to ride it south to Dallas first and then go back up. So it's not really efficient to do that. So, but if it connected to Newton, Kansas, it connects to the line that goes directly to Chicago,
Yeah.
and it could go directly west to California too.
That's right.
So, it's a pretty significant connection. And the RTA stuff. I mean, I think we're hopeful of it, but there's still some unanswered questions about how
That's
it
right.
actually ends up getting funded. But I definitely don't see interest or traffic decreasing there anytime. So, I mean, I'm very open to that suggestion for sure. Yes, ma'am.
Same. And I was curious, like, we're not done with it, right? Like, if you were to go back and see if you could find somebody for evening and bring forward a real world number.
You can amend this.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's-
because we're just riffing off the top of my head. So if I go back and do a little bit of work and amend this ask, we can find out what it would really take.
Yeah, because I
To
would,
put that night service together, because there are things in the back of my head, I'm already thinking like, well, now I have to double my supplies cost if I'm gonna have everybody in and they're using paper towels and everything else. I might have to add a little evening janitorial services to that to make sure that the room is clean and ready for the next morning, like all of those pieces. So I need to think through what that would really cost, but I would happily go take a look.
yeah, well, I'm supportive of moving in that direction.
Yeah,
And
I like the idea.
Okay.
Expanding night services and
Oh,
exploring.
we do too. We would love it.
Councilmember Nash, do you have any objection?
Nope. I think it's kind of insane that we, being the third largest city, we're just an unmanned train station.
Yeah.
But you don't get any state funding at all.
We get no state,
I mean, I know
no
the
Amtrak
state-
funding, so there's no
Right.
funding for the depot, and the building was just,
State appropriation money to Amtrak.
Right, I was gonna say, the state is kind of subsidizing the Amtrak service, and
that's right.
I don't know if it's still
To a
a
large
thing, but I
extent.
guess Texas wasn't paying anything.
No,
for it,
and we
so-
did find that out in our, Department of Transportation meeting, that the Oklahoma Department of Transportation is funding the lion's share of the Heartland Flyers function, because Texas keeps arguing that it's not a benefit to them. To which the Department of Transportation people thought, wait a minute, a train headed in your direction full of passengers is not a benefit to you? I cannot
Yeah.
You don't have to
understand.
be logical to be in government.
Well, there is that. Yeah.
It's also something, I'm interrupting.
No, it's fine.
It's also something too, we're trying to take people off of roads. We're trying to make air better.
That's right.
We're trying to do all kinds of
That's
things in
right.
that direction. This is a simple step at very little cost comparatively to make things easier for people to take the train. It's,
And you'll see, part of that request was we have some, it's some meager signage outside, but being able to let people know that we were a functioning train station, what part we can do to let people know that this is the place. Because that is one of the most common things we get is people walking in and they'll walk to the rail house across the
Oh, no, not
street,
quite.
or they'll come to us and they'll go, is this the train station?
They probably think
You
it's
found
just
the
a
spot.
historic-
Come on in. Huh?
They probably think it's just like a historic boutique
A
thing or
historic
something.
boutique built, that's right. And so we
two
get
chunks
that
of
all
metal
the
going
time.
down the track to keep.
Right
That's
next to
the
it.
spot, kids.
Okay.
Anyway, well, thank you very much for
Absolutely.
putting that in.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson.
Of course.
Other questions on other groups? Yes, sir.
Okay, so the social voluntary services, I didn't see a complete breakdown of what that gets divided up. I know food and shelter is one of them, and I was thinking Virtue Center and Women's Resource Center, but I wasn't sure what all that 250 gets divided up between.
I thought that
all of
was,
the agencies are, you know, contracted with council.
Lisa Craig has a committee that accepts applications for that funding, and they'll vet the applications and then award after they receive these funds. So it is, the Food and Shelter is usually one of the recipients, but it's a group of recipients.
So if we weren't funding a friend's house, our total contribution to those types of services would be included inside that 250.
Our total general fund.
Total general fund.
Yes. I know that one in particular, it definitely gets CDBG money.
Yeah, sure. But our general fund allocation to nonprofit services for homeless or for domestic violence stuff is 250,000, and that gets divided up between whatever entities apply for it. So it's a pretty small chunk of our, I mean, it's a fraction of a percent of our budget, that part is. But I was, like, we talked about it last year, people think we spend $10 million a year on the shelter or something. It's a very low amount that we're spending of our city budget. Even if you include the shelter, it's still, I mean, there's always outside emergency services and different things that cost money to address situations, but our direct funding, just for everybody listening, our direct funding to these types of services is almost nothing. I mean,
it is, and historical. Where is she? She's not here. The historical building got, golly, what was it? They got a grant just the other day. You might not have even got it yet.
the house?
The house itself, Lindsay Moore House.
Yeah.
Got a grant to fix things up and to do stuff. It's looking for money anywhere for these guys, so.
Yeah.
This is a way of being able to do a lot of the, to help them stay in business, so we've got services that do work for people. But one question I had, I need your memory. We were talking about Firehouse last year, and Anthony made the comment that we made that 60,000 permanent. That's what we did.
That was what you decided
Okay.
last year.
Well,
I just didn't remember.
I do remember asking the question, though, is like, you know, if we gave you this increase right now, is the goal to keep asking for that same amount every year, or is there a goal to, like, we give this influx of funds, but then the firehouse fundraises or whatever, and they wean that down? So I don't,
We could ask Anthony.
it's kind of what I was like,
Yeah.
yeah. So
If you would.
I remember the discussion we had about it, because
I think I remember my response.
that there's never going to be a shortage, I think, of needs.
If you come over here so you can stay on the
I'd be
mic.
happy to.
But I know last year, you know, you had just come on and had a lot of things you wanted to improve and change. And so part of that increase, I think, was to help accomplish some of that. And so I guess the justification for this year to maintain that level, what kind of things do you have in mind?
So we're in a really good position to receive funds from the state for ARPA. This past year, we had a lot of problems with our building. I want to say the Parks Department had around 150 allocated to go back into the firehouse, and those funds were reallocated to another parks project.
Oops.
And so that's okay. We have some grant opportunities. So our ARPA funds that we've applied to are 100% for the restoration of the building.
Okay.
And so that'll go back into a security system that'll support Lions Park and the firehouse. That'll also go into the restoration of the pottery patio back there, our kiln yard.
Yeah.
So all three of those kilns don't work, which is a real pain. The gas plumbing is a mess. We had 20 leaks in the firehouse. So we were able to fix that with Parks and Rec. We also had black mold on the north side of our building. So all those have been fixed up. I think this Friday we're going to be reopening for the first time in about a month and a half. So it's going to be exciting to have our gift shop and our gallery back open after the holiday. But those funds will restore that kiln yard and allow us to have a larger kiln and a clay mixer as well, which we got from USAO last year. And so it's
You
pretty
had
exciting.
3 kilns and you're gonna go to 1 big kiln?
Yes, sir. So right now, we're having attendance has practically doubled. If you've seen the report this past year at the firehouse, we have about 150 plus people coming to our exhibition openings, and I can't fit them all in there. And so having 1 kiln and creating some patio furniture and areas for people to hang out in will allow us to serve more people and see more of our community in our space. Right now, I've just been putting stools out on the backyard there, so.
So you're not asking for an increase, you're just
No.
asking to maintain what we raised it to last year?
If you'll notice, we have received a lot more funding this year. We were able to secure a grant from the Kirkpatrick Foundation, the Kerr Foundation, OG&E Foundation, and I'm hoping for McCaslin coming up. So we're definitely working hard to get more funding. The main goal is to really serve our fifth grade audience. I don't know how many people know here, but our third, fourth, and fifth graders, they do not have a dedicated art teacher. And so they start art here in Norman Public Schools in sixth grade. And so we're talking with the Norman Public School Foundation and hopefully hiring a full-time art educator. So our faculty right now is all contract. We have over 20 contract faculty members that are creating all these awesome programs and classes for us. But getting one just to serve the elementary school audience would greatly affect the visual arts education here in Norman.
Yeah.
So that's the ultimate goal. I'd love to be able to raise enough money to provide for a position like that.
So it's successful, it's growing in popularity. Those are good things.
It's essential. And that's just how you get, whether you're an engineer or an artist, you have to be able to do
And it's a
things
historic Norman
creative.
building too. I don't think it was our first firehouse, but it was.
Second one,
Yeah, the
number
second
2,
one, yeah.
1946.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. My other question, not regarding Firehouse, was about CCFI, actually. And
I asked, but they weren't here.
Okay.
But there is a report.
so I only ask about that because, a decade or so ago, the county commissioners voted to eliminate county funding for it. And it was the city that stepped in and filled the gap that the county created. Different county commissioners now, so, I don't know, it serves, I don't think it just serves kids in Norman, I think it serves kids from all over this area, so, I don't know, I'm definitely willing to, I am all for funding it, and I don't mind increasing it, but it would be nice if the county would be interested in, they don't have to fund the whole thing, but would contribute some to this county service, basically, and especially since they used to fund the whole thing. So I don't know, that might be a conversation we could have with them before we approve a final budget, is if they were able or willing to contribute some, that would be helpful, and then we wouldn't have to take it all on ourselves.
Saying like matching?
Matching, or maybe they cover that increase, that 30,000. I don't know. Doesn't sound like a lot for the county, but.
Well, getting money out of the county, is getting it out of me, so.
I don't know, but it's, I just thought it'd be a conversation worth having with them, since there are, at least, I can't recall if Rod was even on when that decision was made either, so I don't think he was. So I think it was all 3 different county commissioners back then. So that was like 2011 or 12 when that happened.
I'm
so.
meeting with Commissioner Griffith,
Some,
can't even get it, Rusty, anyway. Grisham. Wednesday, so I'll put that on my list of
Yeah,
asks.
it's worth asking.
Yes, ma'am.
yes, and I would say the kids that go there have like complex traumas and also are
yeah.
victims, so it is, like, the county should be interested in their welfare as well.
Sure.
So-
And Boys and Girls Club is also in there
Yeah,
too, right?
yeah.
That's a Norman PD deal, as I remember.
That's the after-school program. but yes.
After-school program, yeah. All right, other questions?
Let's see. Are we going line by line?
You go however you want to
Okay.
go.
Let's see. I'm supportive of all of them. Let me back up. The majority have provided, tax returns or audited financial statements, prior year financials. And while there's one that provided just the request and itemization of what the use of funds would be, we didn't get the prior year tax returns, the prior year financial results. So, and that would be Norman Music Festival.
Okay,
So, I'm not in favor of a $50,000 request I'm happy to support the 10,000.
I agree. Yes, sir?
I was just gonna see if Sherry might wanna talk about Norm Music Festival.
I'm back.
Back again.
We went
Back.
from contributing $0 to the festival to
right.
10,000 last year.
So this is where our direct request comes in.
Yeah.
And this one is a new one, and we really appreciated the 10,000. There are a couple of opportunities before the Norman Music Festival. First, the budget for the Norman Music Festival has grown exponentially as the festival has grown. When I came on board about 8 years ago, that budget was about $125,000 a year. It is now $280,000 a year, and we have not increased our artist or production budget. That is simply the infrastructure cost it takes to put on the festival. That is the increased cost of fencing, portable toilets, security, street closure, permitting, and every other piece that goes into getting this ready for production. So this year, we have the largest headliners that we've ever had. We also have engaged a digital strategy partner to do outreach to surrounding markets to make sure that everybody knows this is the largest festival in Oklahoma and the best music festival in the region. So digital strategy partners are going to fill those hotels. It's one thing that we didn't do in earlier years because we didn't simply have enough hotel beds for the influx of visitors that we anticipated that might want to come to the Norman Music Festival. This is the year where we finally feel like our community is ready, our city is ready to be able to host a tourism draw like we know the festival can be. So that digital strategy partner is going to do that work. Then there are another couple of opportunities. We've identified some potential funding. That really depends on whether or not the community supports the festival. There are a couple of things going on. One is our conversations with the Oklahoma Film and Music Office. They have been doing a lot of work with film certified cities.
Yep.
Music certified cities is next on their agenda. So having a music certified city, and we think that Norman could absolutely be one of those. One of the things that they do look at is your community supportive of and invest in? So having our city as a partner in this festival would be very helpful. Our costs directly to the city have hit that $10,000 mark. So we pay, as you know, we pay to have a festival happen rather than get support from our city to have that happen. Couple of reasons why we've chosen that number, and I'm sorry I didn't bring my proposal with me, so somebody might remind me if I get it wrong, is that we wanted our city's help in doing the work that we do on top of what city services can do for us. We pay now $9,000 for sanitation above what our city services can handle because we pay to make sure that those streets are clean, that our downtown businesses are not inconvenienced, and that by Sunday morning it looks like we were never there. That's what we take care of.
Yes.
So we do that. We also have security in addition to our Norman police officers to make sure that the areas that we produce, our stage areas, are areas that we take care of, which alleviates the burden on our police force and make sure that they're able to patrol at large. So it's that kind of support, plus potentially if some support for the administrative costs it takes to put the festival together, which are really small, comparatively speaking. We have some very exciting things that I don't think we can talk really loudly, but we have some new partners, and we hope that in the next few years, there will be opportunities that help get this festival fully funded and get it to the level we need it to be to make it sustainable. But right now, we're asking for the city's help to get
Well,
there.
I would have expected to have seen a more detailed proposal outlining everything and seeing a comparative, the prior year financials.
Did I not send those along? Because I can absolutely
No.
send them. I
So,
thought those were
as of-
included in the proposal that I sent to you, because
Right
I
now.
always send them.
I'm okay with 10,000. I'm not okay with 50.
Increasing it
this
10? Or
The request is
Is
to
it this
increase it by
request?
40.
So that's the request, and I did send the prior year financials
Just
along
out.
with, if they didn't make it in your packet.
There is
you
not
got
a
them.
set of financials in here.
There's not a Form 990, there's not.
Oh, I got it right here, I'm happy to forward it to you.
Can you send me the prior year financials or the
I've
tax
got
return?
both right here, and I could send you them both right now. I'll make sure that the entire group gets them. Yeah, absolutely.
Are you, Councilor Montoya, are you saying you'd be okay with increasing it by 10,000 or just maintaining the 10,000 we allocated last year?
Yeah, I'm fine with the allocation that they received last year.
Okay.
Yeah,
But not,
but not the
potentially
additional 40.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay. I think, yeah, that info would be helpful. I get to see how that.
Yeah, I'm happy to send. I've got like I said, I've got 990 and prior years. It's grant season, so I've got all this information together to submit with grants at my fingertips. So
And
I'm
you're
happy to
saying-
send them along right now.
You're saying in here that 50,000 could get the city's name on a stage type thing, or
Oh,
advertising for the
absolutely.
city of Norman?
Yeah.
I mean, I've thought it would be a good idea before if the city was involved, and one of the announcements was thanking the city of Norman, and
We would love to do that.
so that could be a benefit. And I know voters did approve an increase to the hotel motel tax, and I don't. So to promote more tourism and things like that. So I'm not opposed to an increase. I don't know about 40,000. I think we may need to discuss that, but
Sure.
I would be open to an increase for sure. And I think if we could take a look at the information that Councilor Montoya is asking for, that we can.
I will happily
See what
send
that
those
is,
along.
but,
I'm so sorry, I thought those were, I have both, and
Yeah.
I thought they had been sent with the report, and I'll make sure they get to you this
But
afternoon.
I think it's hard to quantify exactly what the benefit is, but I think we all can agree that it's a major plus
So our
having that.
estimated economic impact to the city is $4.5 million in generated economic activity over the weekend, which benefits
Yeah.
mostly our locally owned businesses downtown.
Exactly.
We're really super proud of the fact that many of the businesses that have relocated to downtown are happy to tell us they relocated so that they can be there during the festival. Many of our downtown business partners let us know they make about 3 months of their rent and bills off of that one weekend, which makes sure that they're there all year round. And so.
Being
Survive
a
the
former
summer.
chairman, I recall all the downtowners saying, hey, this festival, whenever the students leave, they're the ones that keep us afloat during the summer.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but given that I'm also a CPA and I'm heavy in accounting, and anytime approving anything, I need the details to review.
Of course,
the
and like I said,
justification
I have them,
such.
and I'll
So-
send them along to you in about 10 minutes.
Wonderful. All right, well, thank you, ma'am.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thanks.
I think that's just a note on that, those things that we do that have to do with, we're gonna soon talk about certified film for the city, and we're gonna very quickly talk about the music
Yeah.
certification, to be able to bring those persons here to be able to do so. Yes, sir.
Yeah, the Norman Music Festival, like the kind of siding with Councilmember Montoya on this one with the maybe not the full $40,000 increase. 50,000. No, just looking at the $50,000 expenditure. Need about $1.1 million in sales to recoup that. And by the numbers they had, it's about 40 with $100,000, or not dollars, but 100,000 people, and the 4 or 5 million economic impact. If those were sales, and that's about $40 spent a person, that would mean that we'd need about 27,500 more people to at that $40 to generate that 1.1 million. But then, if there's 6,000 more people that come to Norman that we can spend $200 each, and that would recoup that cost. Maybe not the full 40,000 increase. This is kind of
We'd
my
have to add it
position
up.
on it, but somewhere in between, some kind of increase for that the digital campaign or the marketing campaign that she was explaining, to try to pull more people in, because that would have that benefit. I think that we'd see economic impact around just not only downtown but hotels and all around Norman.
You're right. Yes, ma'am.
Just need a little clarification. So we're still working through this, like, we see these tax returns and whatnot, and we're revisiting this topic about how much we're funding
We'll have
at
to.
the very end. Okay.
We'll have to. These are their final submissions, but for us to make a decision, some more information is needed. We're gonna change some things like at the depot. So we're gonna have to come around again and make that decision, say yay, nay. Plus, we're gonna have to make it on the dais, so.
Typically, that would be when you approve the proposed budget, but we can revisit these funding requests at another finance committee meeting.
Okay.
It
Like to
should
see
be
that,
easy,
yeah.
because we've already gone over, yes, sir.
Yeah, on that same line, so we talked with Anthony before about what it costs the festival for city services.
Yeah, yeah.
And Anthony didn't recommend that we waive the fees, but allocating funding that they can use, basically
Yeah.
give them and they give it right back to us. But I'm very interested in finding a way to cover whatever that city cost is to close the street, whatever services we're providing, that's not coming out of the pocket of the festival. And, because I agree, like, we got a festival, but we're making them pay us
Yeah.
to provide that stuff when it's bringing thousands of visitors. And I think it's not beyond, I'd say on average, probably each attendees, if they're staying the 3 days, they're spending $200 for sure. Most likely on food and drinks, and if they're staying somewhere, or a hotel or whatnot. So, I mean, I think we could justify that for sure, and could justify increasing it too if we have if information that council members are requesting is provided.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I like that point. Yeah, can you guys provide us with information on what we charge the festival?
I believe she has that in her proposal.
Oh,
Yeah, it's,
in her proposal.
Page 141 of your packet.
so.
There we go. Right in front of her.
Well, so $27,080, is that what I understand?
That's just the breakout of what, I mean,
Yeah.
do we pay for the electrician? I think
That's what I
they,
was gonna say.
they
Yeah.
pay for the electrician.
We pay $1,300. We would pay, that'd be $1,300 plus $1,100.
Okay, let me phrase the request. Can I see information from the city's financials on what we either charge them or what they pay us?
On that.
And just since we're all clear, so when we see the tax returns not being a CPA, what are we looking for when we're going through?
Well, I would prefer to see the prior year's financial statements.
So what they spent
Yes.
overall. Okay, gotcha.
I like to see the detail because this doesn't provide me with anything to justify a request. Whereas all the other organizations provided a annual report and their tax returns and audited financial statements or some kind of financial statement, but I don't have anything to go on.
I was kind of hoping
To
you
approve
might
it,
be
so.
like, you might want to check out this line on the tax return, but yeah.
I looked at my email. She did submit an income statement for last year. It doesn't look like it made it into the packet, so that was our mistake, but we'll get that
We'll
to you.
get it. We'll get it
Yeah.
in 10 minutes kind of thing. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I feel like we could justify the full increase that they're asking for based on the festival
Contingent.
performance, we could. And I definitely want to revisit that when we have some more information that Councilmember Montoya is
Good with
asking,
that.
but I'm definitely
I'll
open to,
revisit once we get all the information.
I'm definitely open to
And I have
it.
time to look at it because, I mean, it's 5:30.
yeah.
Oh,
No, it's
God.
gone by fast. I did have
I'm
a
not gonna have time
question.
to look at it right now.
Yeah.
I did have a question for Jennifer Baker, if possible, about the theater.
Sure.
Just, so,
And this is Nancy, too.
Hi.
Linda,
Hello.
Nancy's our.
so a $23,107 increase. I know, we're gonna try and get together and talk about
We
some of
are,
that,
and I know-
but what kind of things is the
Well-
theater needing that increase for?
Yeah, I'll tell you, we all know everything's gone up, even with the amount of growth that our little theater has seen.
Yeah.
We've not increased our staff since 2009 either, which we need to do that somehow. But, you know, we're talking about accessibility, and I know Helen and Stephen, I know we've talked, or we're going to, I'm going to show y'all the theater and what we're thinking about and dreaming about. But accessibility is huge to us right now, and we want to hire an interpreter for our performances. And we do 46 performances of our own. It's about a show a week. We can't afford to do one for every show, but we're looking at maybe we could do one for every run of a show.
So like the Saturday afternoon.
Or a Sunday
matinee
afternoon.
will be always the one that has the ASL
interpreter,
interpreters
yeah.
at it.
And honestly, we started it years ago. We did it on Sunday matinees and we just couldn't afford it anymore. We had to, we've increased security. We've hired some security, and that's been a cost that we didn't expect. We have a very healthy scholarship program, and for those of you that don't know me, so I'm gonna get real personal real quick, but then I won't ramble. I'll try to hurry because I know you want to get out of here. We had 237 scholarship requests this year. And we give some years up to 50,000 in scholarships. And that's probably not a great, for the business-minded, it's probably not a great, we shouldn't give that much for the size of our organization, but we do, and we're never turning away a child, ever. It's our philosophy, we are not turning them away. And I grew up in Norman, Oklahoma, and you're looking at the scholarship child, and if it weren't for all of us, my first show was 5 years old at the City of Norman, Rotary House, and I was a Georgia peach. But, you know, that changed my life. And when I got here 21 years ago, and she gets tired of hearing me say it, but, you know, I thought we were just gonna put on shows. Catherine, you've got a daughter that's done it, you know, I thought, oh, it's all just about shows. It's not really about shows. It's about these kids finding a place to belong and these kids finding their people. And there are some days we walk out of there, we're not sweating and tired from the rehearsal. We're just like, what just happened? This poor kid. They need it. They need it. And we think, and I'm so proud of this team at the Sooner Theater. It's just, we need more. We need more hands. We've got 1,200 kids. And that's all in addition to the regular Sooner Theater programming too. So we've just grown and everything's more expensive. And that's kind of where we are right now.
Your report says you haven't had an increase since 2009.
Right, we
You
haven't asked for
from
one.
us.
I've had this kind of philosophy that you give us a building, well, okay, we rent a building for $1 a year. You give us a building, you give us some startup cash. It used to go towards the director, I think, for years. It paid the director. I think Anthony was talking a little bit how that changed. You give us startup money, you give us a building, and if you can't make a go of it, there's a problem.
Yeah.
And we have made a go of it. And, you know, we started with 3 employees when I got there, and we've got 6 now. We need more. And as the next couple of years, you know, we haven't asked because there's some dreams, there's some things we want to do in the future. And you feel like, well, we just kind of be sensitive to what the budget looks like every year with you guys. But we've got to take care of some accessibility issues coming up.
That's legal. We have to.
We have to, and we've got some ideas, and I can't wait to just walk some of you through and show you what I think we can do. There's a man that, I'm currently in the Leadership Oklahoma class, and we're touring these communities every month for 4 days, and it's an honor to be a part of it, but I am so proud every session because I think, God, Norman's got it going on. We really do. From the help with the homeless to what we do with our downtown to we've got it going on. But I've been jealous a few times of some of their theaters, and this place, the Sooner, is amazing. And the Parks has done an incredible job taking care of it, but there's some things we need to do accessibility-wise. So that's next on the horizon.
Yeah. Yeah, I fully support it, and I mean, I know what you mean about, you know, it is all about the kids, and I know how much what you guys are there for the kids, because I know several people in our community whose kids have grown up through Sooner Theater, I mean, for years and years and years, so I know how important that program for those kids are.
Thank you.
It's really important.
I had 2 of them.
Yeah.
They had a good time, and they learned what they were supposed to learn, and now one's a special education teacher, the other one's an art teacher.
I love it.
So,
Good for them.
I mean, it fits what goes in there. But I think most people don't understand how important it is to have the creative juices going in those kids' minds as quickly as we can get that done.
Exactly.
We can't
Yeah.
have, all of us can't be mathematicians,
Yeah.
so.
And you know what? Most of them aren't looking for a career at Broadway, and they never make it, but it's not about that, you know, it's about just giving them that opportunity to, like I said, find their people, hone their craft. And I don't want to sit here and just pull at heartstrings, but do you remember the kid a few years ago that jumped off the I-35 bridge and landed, the I-35 in Robinson landed in the highway? He was one of our students, and he lived.
Yeah, I do remember that.
I don't know how he lived.
Yeah.
And his mom texted me that when he woke up and talked to the doctor, he said, well, when can I get back to rehearsal? And I thought, what? So it means everything to some of these kiddos. And I don't know, we're very proud. Like I said, I'm proud of my team. We got to add team. We got to go back and relook and add some team members. And we've got 33 contract teachers, but we've only got a staff of 6, really 5.5, serving both buildings. So anyway, if you seem, you know, if you have any other questions or anything else we can provide.
All right, guess not. Thank you. Thank you both.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Okay. Any other questions on 2?
I think that went over all the increases, so, yeah.
Well, let's shift to 3.
All right.
Item number 3, discussion regarding monthly revenue and expenditure reports. Meat and potatoes.
So the reports, of course, are in the packet. I'd be happy to entertain any questions you have on revenue report, expenditure report for the general fund, and then the sales tax reports. Comparatively, of course, Norman is kind of neck and neck with what the state of Oklahoma is showing overall.
Yeah.
Nothing crazy except for Lawton. I'm not sure what's going on with Lawton
Yeah.
the last couple of months, but
I think they got Long John Silver's.
Yeah.
that must be it.
Yeah.
On the summary right here, this is page 147 of the packet. I mean, I just noticed this large negative 495%. Do you know what that is or what has caused? It's the major water fund revenue sources, and it is the user fees institutional.
Is that paid out for water, AMAs?
Your packet has different pages than mine. I apologize.
Page, where you are?
Well, I printed this this weekend, so it might be
Right underneath your thumb there.
147.
Water fund. Okay. Let's look. Institutional. So the negative 495 you're looking at.
Yeah,
is
that percent change, that's a very large, unusual number. Do you know what that might be caused by?
2005, and this is in water fund. I believe that's a difference in how they were. Those were OU payments, and they were, I think, calculating the receivable incorrectly.
Okay,
And they figured it out and
Okay.
corrected it. So that's
Okay.
that was in prior year.
okay,
But yeah.
all right.
And I think the rate changed too, because they had a superior rate and then they went to a normal rate.
Not sure about that, but I know that there was an issue with the receivable calculation. But you're probably correct there too.
It was something I just came up. Yes, sir.
So yeah, we talk about that each month, but we're seeing slightly negative numbers overall this year, or this fiscal year so far, but negative in the sense that we're comparing to record highs.
Correct.
And other communities, maybe Lawton, they were not having such a high as we were the last 3 years. So it's kind of hard to really compare because it's just unprecedented levels of sales tax revenue coming in, and then it looks like we're lower, but we're still significantly higher than the average levels back in 2019 before this new era.
Yeah, I've been calculating after this, calculating on a per capita basis. Anthony tells me that is not correct procedure. And, but to me, it gives me a scale that doesn't move as quickly. It's not as volatile. It
Yeah.
just seems to, how much per head are we earning? And it's itty bitty, but you can see there's really not much variation. It's good and flat.
Yeah.
And I have to explain it to myself, I guess, in that manner, because when I see it go up and down, I think, what did we do? Well, there wasn't a cause and effect. It just is. And, did somebody buy 200 Xboxes over well, is that use tax too, over the internet?
Internet would be
So-
use tax, yeah.
I mean, I couldn't figure it out. That's why I just started doing that for myself until I asked Anthony. He told me that wasn't right, but I'll still do it.
Yeah.
This is a wonderful depiction, this chart that shows the last 5 years because
Yes.
you can see how
Yeah.
the last 3 years our receipts have risen and really have
Maintained
maintained
that
that,
level, yeah.
that trend, yeah.
But then it makes it look like if it goes down any at all from that high, it makes it look like we're in the negative when we're.
Well, and compare it to cost of living, to discount it back, and we're losing money. So I don't do that calculation anymore.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting too, because, Moore is tracking at, negative 1.96 for the year, and we're at negative 0.49% for the year. So it's like the South Metro, and because Midwest City is also in that negative for the year too, 0.58. So it's like this part of the metro's not in decline, but it's not rising as fast as it was the last 3 years. I don't know if I'd be interested. I don't know about including it every month, but I'd be interested to see like what Mustang and they're so much smaller towns, but they make up like the western edge of the metro. I know there's a lot of growth happening in Oklahoma City that way. So, because Oklahoma City is just maintaining, like they're the only city that's really in this area that is
Or 800.
continuing to increase.
100,000 people.
Yeah, because even Edmond is just at 0.58% above, so they're tracking slower too. So, but it is always interesting to see how we compare like that and how these record highs continue to kind of maintain at that level, and why too.
It's the why.
Because it also, with all the discussion about businesses closing, or small businesses that aren't closed but are telling us they're having a hard time and struggling, and then we're looking at our thing, we're like, we're bringing in like record sales tax revenue citywide. So it's kind of like business are struggling, but also record sales are happening at the same time. It doesn't mean that those people are shopping at that store or eating at that restaurant, but it's just a kind of a interesting thing when you're like, businesses are struggling, restaurants closing, but at the same time, overall spending seems to be way up.
That's why I tried to do it on Consumer Price Index, because that was supposed to take care of it, but it's the wrong thing. It's groceries and all kinds of other stuff, not concrete and wood, and those things are driving up, so there's no comparative index.
And then what is our current surplus number right now?
No.
In
it
the
was-
general fund?
Yeah, and
I'm not
last
sure if
month I
have
think
that.
Anthony said it was 13 million. We talked about it,
Yeah.
we're spending those, so, but our surplus was still pretty healthy.
Unless we count in ideas for other purchases.
Yes.
I'm
And our-
not super.
Please.
I'm not super well versed with the chief accountant's appropriation reports here, but if this is accurate, it shows ending fund balance at 16 million in the general fund on page
16, okay.
147.
But we identified that PSST expenditures, transit expenditures, many of which may be one-time expenditures, so they kind of make it skew a little bit, but, that we couldn't maintain that level of spending over a number of years without drawing that number way down, so. But I try to ask that every month to see kind of where we're sitting with that surplus and thinking about the one-time expenditures we might be able to address with that and so on, so appreciate that.
Anything else from council? All right. Ms. Shakira,
How you doing, everyone?
would you please come up?
Yes.
Stephen, will you take the meeting for a moment, please?
Oh, sure.
So update, huh? Okay. So as we know, I have a charter that I delivered to you all for your review and approval. From that, there's a policy, procedures for ordinance. It's slipping my mind right now. Yeah, we need the audit committee to approve the charter. Once that is done, we have a policy and procedures that is enacted into Norman policy. And then I'm now currently finalizing the internal audit, internal policy and procedures, while simultaneously developing the risk assessment, which will be used to develop a risk-based audit plan. And on top of that, I am also doing a risk management process because I learned today that management has never done a risk assessment of their own department. So now I'm going to have to provide a citywide risk assessment before doing the audit plan. For the management risk assessment plus my own risk assessment. And also develop a quality assurance and improvement program that will come after the risk assessment is designed. It's going to start in March. I have the interview questions. So the first week of March, I will be sending out questionnaires to directors and line managers of each department, people or personnel who handle key functions such as accounts payable, the PCAR program, things like that. And from there, we will be able to decide our highest priorities as far as the audits that will be planned and the engagements that will take place. I currently am reviewing a contract with the city, with one of the agencies. It looks like we're gonna go into renegotiation of the contract because of the findings. I will deliver that report to you. Hopefully at the end of the month. I'm meeting with Daryl, Catherine, and Anthony to discuss that. Also with the agency director to give her an opportunity to provide some corrective action, the corrective action plan on how we will address those things. But right now I am currently finalizing. So I anticipate the internal audit policy and procedure, internal policy, right, for the department will be about 60 pages, give or take 5. I'm at page 42 right now. And I'm finalizing that. I'm finalizing the risk assessment design. So I'm excited for what March will bring. March is risk assessment month, where I will bring a risk assessment report. And I would like to think I'm ahead of schedule as far as what the steps are in providing an audit plan July 1st. So I will have the entire March to do the risk assessment of all 13 departments. And that will go into creating the audit plan for the next 3 years. It will, I've also been, I think it was approved. I am canvassing a software, case management software, OPEXIS. It's built on the Yellow Book, Government Auditing Standards, which will streamline a lot of the auditing processes since it is a one-woman department right now. It would just kind of help with a lot of the administrative things that has to be done as far as the steps of an audit. So I've conferenced with them. They've done demos with me and the budgets. We're now just trying to get that stuff lined up, but they're giving me a price and everything. So hopefully that's approved and we can have OPEXIS be kind of an assistant to the audit process. I spoke to Daryl today, as I will repeat, but he told me that there has never been a risk assessment done for the city, citywide or department, for the 13 departments. So before I actually go into a risk assessment to develop an audit plan, I have to do a risk management assessment to see how management is basically managing risk. The city, of projects, programs, and things like that. As I sit in these meetings, is what I hear that there are agencies receiving ARPA funds. So that may very well be a part of my list as well, because ARPA, from my understanding, audit risk assessments are required for any agency receiving ARPA funds and audits. So that's kind of been added as well to this risk assessment. So where we are, and you weren't here, so I'll repeat it. We have a charter that is to be approved by audit committee. We have a policy and procedure that is by ordinance, I believe. And then we have the internal audit policy and procedure, which I'm finalizing right now, simultaneously while doing the risk assessment. And then March will be me performing the risk assessment. And then April, hopefully I'll be able to decide with, of course, council and audit committee, what departments, programs, functions, key functions in the city should be top priority as far as an audit goes. So I'm excited.
Charging right along. Questions from,
Making progress.
yeah.
Yes.
Questions from council on Shakira's report? That was easy.
Right?
You got it
I do
right
all the
on the
homework.
fence.
No, I've,
Hey,
I've,
better to be prepared.
Yes.
Than not prepared.
yes,
Yeah, I was
indeed.
prepared for testimony on Tuesday and get to the courthouse and about to open the door and the attorney says, well, we settled. Like, okay.
I want to go all the fun out of it.
Ace of seven.
Took all the fun out of it. Let me say
all that
something.
prep. all
Right,
that-
right. So I'm thinking. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. I want to deliver a report to you all. I know council makes decisions on who we contract with as far as the city, outside agencies, so I will have to deliver this report to you.
Okay.
But before I do that, I have to give management an opportunity to make corrective actions and do those things. So hopefully at the end of March, I can deliver that report to you and then roll on to poor performing risk assessments and risk management assessments.
We'll be here.
Me too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Anything else from council? We're adjourned.